The stars were cold and silent in this part of space. Commander Ben stood at the viewing window of his survey vessel, the Starward Hope, and looked out at the destruction before him. Pieces of broken ships floated everywhere. Metal twisted into strange shapes. Glass shattered into a million tiny pieces that caught the distant starlight like frozen tears. The refugee convoy had been carrying 3,000 souls, families running from a civil war on there, children, elders, people who just wanted to find a safe place to start again. But the pirates had found them first. The attack had been fast and brutal. No survivors expected. No mercy given. Ben was 52 years old. He had served in space for 30 years. He had seen death before. He had seen the aftermath of battles and disasters. But something about this scene made his heart feel heavy in his chest. These were not soldiers. These were not combatants. They were just people trying to escape. "Commander," said his first officer, a woman named Lisa Park, "we should finish our scans and report back to headquarters. There is nothing we can do here." Ben nodded slowly. She was right. That was the logical thing to do, the proper thing. But then his scanner beeped, a small sound in the quiet of the bridge. He looked down at the screen and felt his breath catch in his throat. A life sign, faint, weak, but there. "There is someone alive out there," Ben said. Lisa looked at her own screen and frowned. "The signal is coming from that cargo ship, the one that is broken in half. Commander, even if someone is alive, the Dominion will send their own rescue teams. This is not our responsibility." Ben looked at her. "How long until the Dominion gets here?" Lisa checked her calculations. "At least 6 hours, maybe more." "And how long can that life sign last in a broken ship with no power?" Lisa did not answer. She did not need to. Ben grabbed his emergency suit and headed for the shuttle bay. Lisa called after him, warning him about regulations, about diplomatic problems, about all the things that could go wrong. Ben heard her. He understood her concerns, but he did not stop. The shuttle ride to the broken cargo ship took 15 minutes. Ben flew carefully through the floating debris, avoiding the larger pieces of wreckage. When he reached the cargo ship, he found a hole in the hull large enough to fly through. He landed the shuttle inside what had once been a storage area. Now it was just a frozen tomb filled with crates and bodies. Ben turned on his suit lights and began to search. He found them in the back corner of the hold. A female, her gray fur matted with frozen blood, her body curled protectively around a much smaller form. She was dead. She had been dead for hours, but the small form she held was still moving, still breathing. Ben knelt down and gently moved the dead female aside. The small creature beneath her made a sound of fear and tried to crawl away. It was a cub, barely 6 cycles old by their species count. His fur was soft gray, and his large amber eyes were wide with terror. His pointed ears lay flat against his skull. He was so thin that Ben could see his ribs through his fur. "It is okay," Ben said softly. "I am not going to hurt you." The cub did not understand his words. The translator in Ben's suit was not good with children's dialects, but maybe the tone of his voice got through because the cub stopped trying to run. He just stared at Ben with those huge, scared eyes. Ben reached out slowly and picked up the cub. The small body was cold and shaking. Ben opened his suit's outer jacket and tucked the cub inside, close to his chest where it was warm. The cub made a small whimpering sound and pressed closer to the heat. "I have got you," Ben whispered. "You are safe now." He carried the cub back to the shuttle and flew back to the Starward Hope. Lisa was waiting for him in the shuttle bay with a medical team. When she saw what he was carrying, her face went pale. "Commander, do you know what you have done?" "I saved a child," Ben said. "You have taken a cub. The Dominion will demand his return. There are laws about this, treaties, regulations." Ben looked down at the small creature in his arms. The cub had fallen asleep against his chest, exhausted and weak. His small hands clutched Ben's jacket like it was the only safe thing in the universe. "What will happen to him if I send him back?" Ben asked. Lisa hesitated. She knew the answer as well as he did. Among the orphans without clan were considered cursed, bad luck, shameful. No family would take them. No community would shelter them. They were simply abandoned, left to die. They called it mercy. They believed it was kinder to let such children fade away than to force them to live without a clan. Ben did not believe in that kind of mercy. "His name is N," the medical officer said, reading the identification tag on the cub's collar. "His entire family was on this convoy, parents, grandparents, siblings, all dead. He has no one left." Ben held the sleeping cub. "He has me." For the next 3 days, Ben stayed with N in the medical bay. The cub did not speak. He barely ate. He just sat in his bed and stared at the wall with empty eyes. The medical officer said it was trauma, shock. The cub had watched his entire world die around him. It would take time for him to come back. Ben did not push. He just sat with N. He brought him warm broth and soft blankets. He talked to him in a gentle voice, even though the cub could not understand the words. He just wanted N to know that he was not alone. On the 4th day, N finally spoke. It was just one word, spoken in a small and broken voice. The translator struggled with it for a moment before giving Ben the meaning. "Why?" Ben looked at the small cub with the sad amber eyes. Why had he saved him? Why had he risked his career, his ship, his future for one small alien child? He could have given 100 logical reasons. He could have talked about duty and compassion and moral obligation. But instead, he just said the truth. "Because you were alone, and no one should be alone." N stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached out and took Ben's hand. His small fingers were cold and thin, but his grip was tight. He did not let go for a very long time. And in that moment, in the quiet of a medical bay on a small survey ship drifting through the cold of space, something changed. A connection was made. A bond was formed. A human had extended a helping hand to a doomed cub, and nothing would ever be the same again. The trouble began the moment the Starbound Hope returned to human space. Word had spread fast about what Commander Ben had done. A human officer had taken a cub from a wreckage site. He had refused to hand the child over to Dominion authorities. He had broken at least a dozen laws and violated several treaties. The Dominion was furious. Their ambassador sent angry messages every hour, demanding the return of the cub. They called it kidnapping. They called it interference in internal affairs. They said that what happened to orphans was a matter, and humans had no right to involve themselves. Ben was called before a military tribunal. They sat behind a long table and looked at him with serious faces. They asked him why he had done what he did. They reminded him of his duty to follow orders. They told him that his actions could damage the relationship between humanity and the Dominion for years to come. Ben listened to all of it. Then he stood up straight and spoke clearly. "I saved a child who was going to die. I would do it again." The tribunal did not know what to do with him. Some wanted to punish him severely. Others admired what he had done but could not say so openly. In the end, they suspended him from active duty while they figured out what to do next. But Ben had allies. His younger sister, Kate, was who had studied biology for 15 years. She was smart and stubborn, and she loved her brother deeply. When she heard what had happened, she flew across 3 star systems to stand by his side. "The practice of abandoning orphans is barbaric," Kate said at a press conference. "We do not accept such treatment of children in human society. Why should we accept it for alien children? A child is a child, regardless of species." Her words made headlines across human space. People began to talk about N. They saw pictures of the small gray cub with the sad amber eyes. They heard about how he had been found clutching his dead mother. Their hearts went out to him. An old friend of Ben's, a retired captain named Sam, came out of retirement to help with the legal case. Sam had spent 20 years in military law before hanging up his uniform. He was gray-haired and walked with a limp from an old injury, but his mind was still sharp as a blade. "The treaties with thee are clear about adult citizens," Sam explained to Ben. "But they are vague about children. There is room to argue that N has a right to asylum under galactic humanitarian law." A young diplomat named Meg Thornton took up the case as her first major assignment. She was only 28 years old, with short brown hair and a determined look in her eyes. Some people thought she was too young and inexperienced for such an important case, but Meg did not care what people thought. She worked 18-hour days, reading every law and every treaty she could find. She built a case piece by piece, like a builder constructing a house. The hearing before the Galactic Assembly was tense. Representatives from dozens of species sat in a great circular chamber, watching and listening. The ambassador spoke first. He was tall and elegant, with silver fur and cold eyes. He talked about tradition and culture, and the right of every species to handle their own affairs. Then Meg stood up to speak. "We are not here to judge culture," she said. "We are here to decide the fate of one child. N is 6 years old. He watched his family die. He was alone and afraid in the cold darkness of space. And when a human found him and offered him warmth and safety, he reached out and took that hand. Are we now going to tell him that hand means nothing? Are we going to send him back to die?" The chamber was silent. In the end, the assembly voted. It was close, closer than anyone expected. But when the final count was done, N was granted asylum on Earth. He would not be sent back to the Dominion. He would be allowed to stay with the human who had saved him. Ben officially adopted N 3 months later. It was a small ceremony in a government office, with Kate and Sam and Meg as witnesses. N did not fully understand what was happening. But when Ben knelt down and told him that he was now his father, that he would always protect him, the small cub threw his arms around Ben's neck and held on tight. The years that followed were not easy. N struggled with many things. Human food was strange to him. Some of it made him sick. Kate had to work with doctors to create a special diet that his body could handle. The Earth climate was hard for him too. He came from a warm world, and Earth winters made him shiver and ache. Ben bought him thick sweaters and heated blankets, and N wore them everywhere. But the hardest thing was the other children. Ben enrolled N in a human school when he turned 8. He thought it would be good for the boy to make friends his own age, but the other children were not kind. They stared at N. They whispered about him. Some of them called him names: alien, freak, monster. N did not fight back. His instincts told him to be quiet, to be small, to not draw attention. Among his own people, orphans learned to disappear. It was how they survived. So N tried to disappear in his human school too. He sat in the back of the class. He ate lunch alone. He never raised his hand or spoke unless spoken to. Ben saw what was happening, and it broke his heart. One evening, he sat down with N in their small apartment and took the boy's hands in his own. "I know it is hard," Ben said. "I know the other children are mean, but you cannot let them make you small. You have a voice, N. You have value. You matter." N looked up at him with those amber eyes. "The others said I was cursed. They said I was nothing." "They were wrong," Ben said firmly. "You are not cursed. You are not nothing. You are my son, and you are going to do incredible things." Every night after that, Ben told him the same thing. He said it when N had good days. He said it when N had bad days. He said it until N began to believe it. Slowly, things began to change. N started to raise his hand in class. He started to answer questions. His teachers noticed that he was smart, very smart. He could see patterns that other students missed. He could understand complex problems from multiple angles. His mind worked differently from human minds, and sometimes different was exactly what was needed. But the most important thing N learned was how to listen. He spent so many years being quiet, watching and observing, that he had developed an incredible ability to understand what people were really saying. Not just their words, but their feelings, their fears, their hopes. He could sense when someone was angry or sad or scared, even when they tried to hide it. Kate called it empathy. Sam called it a gift. Meg said it would make him an excellent diplomat someday. N was not sure about that, but he knew one thing for certain. He knew that a human had saved him when no one else would. A human had given him a home when his own people wanted him to die. A human had told him he mattered until he finally believed it. And N swore to himself that he would spend his life trying to be worthy of that love. On the day N graduated from high school, first in his class, Ben sat in the audience and cried. His sister Kate sat beside him, holding his hand. And when N walked across the stage to receive his diploma, he looked out at the crowd, found his father's face, and smiled. It was the smile of a boy who had been saved from the darkness, and it was only the beginning. N was 24 years old when he graduated from the Interstellar Diplomatic Academy. He was the first ever admitted to the program. He was also the first to graduate with the highest honors the Academy could give. His professors said he had a natural talent for negotiation. His classmates said he could make enemies sit down and talk like old friends. Ben, now retired from the Survey Corps, attended the graduation ceremony. He sat in the front row with Kate, Sam, and Meg. His hair had turned gray over the years, and his face had more lines than before. But his eyes were bright with pride as he watched his son walk across the stage. "You did this," Kate whispered to him. "You made this possible." Ben shook his head. "No, he did this. I just gave him a chance." After graduation, N joined the Human Diplomatic Service. Some people questioned whether an alien should represent humanity. Others wondered if his loyalty could be trusted. But Meg Thornton, now a senior official in the Diplomatic Corps, vouched for him personally. She remembered the scared cub she had fought to protect all those years ago. She knew what he had become. N's early assignments were difficult. His superiors did not trust him yet. They sent him to the worst postings they could find. Border disputes where both sides hated each other. Failed colonies where people were desperate and angry. First contact situations where one wrong word could start a war. They expected him to fail. They wanted him to fail. Then they could say that an alien had no place in human diplomacy. But N did not fail. His first major success came on a world called Prime. Two factions had been fighting there for 300 years. The conflict had started over land rights, but by now nobody remembered the original cause. They just knew they hated each other. Generations had grown up learning that hatred. Children were taught to fear and despise the other side before they could even walk. Previous diplomats had tried everything. Threats, bribes, promises, nothing worked. The two factions would rather die than make peace. N did something different. He did not try to negotiate at first. He did not make speeches or offer deals. Instead, he sat with each side and listened. He listened for days, then weeks. He let them talk about their anger and their pain. He let them tell stories about what they had lost. He did not judge. He did not argue. He just listened. And slowly he began to understand. The conflict was not really about land. It was about fear. Each side was terrified that the other would destroy them. Every attack, every raid, every act of violence was driven by that fear. They fought because they believed it was the only way to survive. N called a meeting with the leaders of both factions. He did not talk about peace. He talked about fear. "You are both afraid," he said. "You have been afraid for 300 years, and that fear has made you do terrible things to each other. But what if the fear could end? What if you could wake up tomorrow and know that your children were safe? What if you could live without looking over your shoulder?" The leaders stared at him. No one had ever spoken to them like this before. N spent the next month working out a solution. He created a security agreement that gave both sides what they needed most: safety, shared patrols, joint defense forces, early warning systems. He did not ask either side to trust each other. He just asked them to trust the system. The accords were signed on a cold morning in the central plaza of the planet's capital city. Both faction leaders shook hands for the first time in 3 centuries. People wept in the streets. A war that had lasted longer than most civilizations was finally over. N became famous after Prime. News networks across the galaxy told his story. The orphan cub who had been saved by a human. The diplomat who could make enemies into allies. The bridge between worlds. But his greatest test was still to come. 5 years after Prime, N was assigned to lead trade negotiations with the Dominion. It was the first time he would face his own people since his rescue as a child. The assignment was controversial. Some said it was cruel to send him. Others said he was the only one who could do it. N accepted the assignment without hesitation. The Dominion representatives arrived on the neutral station where the talks would take place. There were 5 of them, all from high clans, all dressed in the formal robes of diplomacy. Their leader was a female named Era. She was old and powerful, with white fur and sharp eyes that had seen 100 negotiations. When Era saw N, her face did not change. She looked at him as if he were a piece of furniture, an object, nothing. Among the orphans were persons. They did not exist in any meaningful way. To acknowledge N, to speak to him directly, would be to admit that he had value. Era was not prepared to do that. So she spoke to the human beside N instead. She addressed all her comments to his assistant. She pretended that N was not in the room. N could have been angry. He had every right to be. These were the people who had wanted him to die. These were the people who called him cursed and worthless. For a moment, old feelings rose up inside him. The shame, the fear, the belief that he was nothing. But then he remembered his father's words. You are not nothing, you matter. N pushed the feelings aside and focused on his job. If Era wanted to pretend he did not exist, he would work around it. He passed notes to his assistant, who read them aloud. He made suggestions through intermediaries. He conducted the entire negotiation without ever demanding to be seen. It was humiliating. Some of the human staff wanted to walk out in protest, but N told them to stay. This is not about me, he said. This is about building something that will help both our peoples. My pride is not more important than that. The negotiations lasted 2 weeks. They were tense and difficult. They drove hard bargains, and N had to find creative solutions to every problem. But in the end, a trade agreement was reached. Both sides gained something valuable. Both sides walked away satisfied. On the last day, something unexpected happened. As the delegations were preparing to leave, Era stopped in front of N. For the first time, she looked directly at him. Her sharp eyes studied his face. You are strange, she said. You have every reason to hate us, yet you show us respect we have not earned. N bowed his head in the traditional manner. Respect is not about what others deserve. It is about who I choose to be. Era was silent for a long moment. Then slowly she returned the bow. It was small, brief, but it was real. For the first time in his life, a high clan had acknowledged N as a person. The moment was captured by news drones and broadcast across the galaxy. People everywhere saw the image of N bowing to those who had rejected him and receiving a bow in return. Commentators called it remarkable. They said it was the most human thing a non-human had ever done. N would have said that humanity had nothing to do with species. It was about choice. It was about deciding to be better than your pain. When he returned home, Ben was waiting for him at the spaceport. The old man's eyes were wet with tears. He did not say anything. He just hugged his son and held him tight. I saw what you did, Ben finally said. I am so proud of you. N hugged him back. I learned it from you, Father. Everything I am, I learned from you. And both of them knew it was true. 20 years had passed since Ben pulled a frightened cub from the wreckage of a destroyed convoy. In that time, N had become the most respected diplomat in human space. He had negotiated treaties that ended wars. He had built bridges between species that had hated each other for centuries. Leaders across the galaxy knew his name and requested him by name for their most difficult problems. But nothing had prepared him for the Hollow. The first reports came from the outer rim of the galaxy. Scout ships had detected massive objects moving through deep space, objects larger than anything ever recorded. At first, scientists thought they were asteroids or comets. Then the objects changed course. They moved with purpose. They moved with intent. The Hollow had arrived. They were unlike any species the galaxy had ever encountered. They were not made of flesh and blood. They were silicon-based entities, living crystals that pulsed with strange light. Their bodies were vast, some as large as small moons. They traveled in grate that drifted through the void like mountains given motion. And they were destroying everything in their path. The first colony to fall was a mining station on the edge of known space. 3,000 workers lived there. When the Hollow arrived, they broadcast no warning. They made no demands. They simply released a wave of energy that turned the station to dust. Nothing survived. More attacks followed. Another colony, a research station, a passenger ship. The Hollow moved slowly but steadily toward the inhabited systems, and nothing could stop them. The Galactic Assembly called an emergency session. Representatives from every species gathered to discuss the crisis. Military leaders talked about weapons and fleets and battle plans, but everyone knew the truth. The combined forces of the galaxy could not defeat the Hollow. Their technology was too advanced. Their ships were too powerful. A war against them would be a war of extinction. N was appointed as humanity's lead representative to the Emergency Council. It was the most important assignment of his career. The fate of billions rested on what happened next. "We need to find a way to communicate with them," N said at the first council meeting. "We need to understand why they are doing this." The military leaders laughed at him. The Hollow did not communicate. They had ignored every attempt at contact. Radio signals, light pulses, mathematical sequences, nothing worked. They simply advanced and destroyed. But N did not give up. He gathered a team of the best scientists and linguists in the galaxy. His Aunt Kate, now an elder scientist with white hair and tired eyes, led the xenobiology division. Together, they studied everything they could find about the Hollow. The breakthrough came after 3 months of desperate work. A young physicist noticed something strange in the energy patterns the Hollow emitted. They were not random. They had structure, rhythm. It was not radio communication or light signals. It was gravitational pulses. The Hollow communicated through gravity itself. Kate worked day and night to decode the patterns. What she found changed everything. The Hollow were not mindless destroyers. They were a species in mourning. Millions of years ago, there had been a paradise of crystalline forests and singing mountains. They had lived in peace, their civilization stretching across 1,000 worlds. Then organic life had found them. A virus carried by explorers from a distant system had spread through their population. It could not infect them directly, but it poisoned their world. Their crystalline forests died. Their singing mountains fell silent. Within a generation, everything they loved was gone. The survivors had fled into deep space, carrying their grief with them. They wandered for millions of years, their pain hardening into rage. They began to see all organic life as a threat, a disease, something to be cleansed before it could destroy again. They were not evil, they were traumatized, they were alone. N understood that feeling better than anyone. He went to the Emergency Council with his findings. He asked for permission to attempt communication using the gravitational patterns Kate had decoded. The council was divided. Some said it was worth trying. Others said it was a waste of time. The Hollow had shown no interest in talking. Why would they start now? But N was persuasive. He reminded them that every species the galaxy had ever encountered had reasons for what they did. The Hollow were not monsters. They were beings in pain, and beings in pain could sometimes be reached. The council gave him permission, but with a warning. If his attempt failed, they would have no choice but to launch a military strike. It would probably fail too, but they would have to try. N prepared his mission. He took a small shuttle, armed with nothing but a gravitational transmitter and the message he had composed with Kate's help. His friends begged him not to go. It was too dangerous. The Hollow had destroyed everything that approached them. He would be flying to his death. Ben, now 73 years old and frail with age, came to see him before he left. The old man's hand shook as he gripped his son's arms. "You do not have to do this," Ben said. "Let someone else go, please." En looked at his father, the man who had saved him, the man who had given him everything. He saw the fear in Ben's eyes and felt his heart ache. "I have to try," En said softly. "If there is even a small chance I can stop this war, I have to take it. You taught me that. You taught me that one person, choosing to care, can change everything." Ben's eyes filled with tears. He pulled En into a tight embrace. "Come back to me," he whispered. "Promise me you will come back." "I promise," En said. The shuttle launched 3 hours later. En flew alone into the darkness between stars, toward the massive shapes of the Hollow. They grew larger in his until they filled his entire vision. Mountains of living crystal, pulsing with cold light, beautiful and terrible at the same time. His proximity alarms screamed as weapons locked onto his tiny vessel. He was seconds from death, but he did not turn back. Instead, he activated the gravitational transmitter and sent his message. It was simple, just a few patterns of gravitational pulses that Kate had helped him compose, but the meaning was clear. "We know you are in pain. We are sorry for what was done to you. You are not alone anymore." The weapons did not fire. For a long moment, nothing happened. En sat in his shuttle, his heart pounding, waiting to die. The Hollow hung before him like silent judges. Then the response came, a pattern of gravitational pulses that washed over his shuttle like a wave. Kate had taught him enough to understand the basic meaning. "You know our pain," En replied without hesitation. "Yes, I know what it is to lose everything. I know what it is to be alone. I know what it is to be so hurt that you want to hurt others. But I also know that pain does not have to be forever. I was saved from my pain by a stranger who showed me kindness. Let me offer you the same." Another long silence, then another response. "Come speak, we will listen." En let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Tears streamed down his face as he guided his shuttle toward the largest of the. He was not going to die today. He was going to talk. And maybe, just maybe, he was going to save the galaxy. Back on Earth, Ben sat in his small apartment, watching the news feeds. He saw the image of his son's tiny shuttle approaching the vast Hollow. He saw the weapons powering down. He heard the news anchors speaking in shocked voices about what was happening. "He is doing it," Kate said beside him, her voice trembling. "He is actually doing it." Ben closed his eyes and let the tears fall. "That is my son," he whispered. "That is my boy." And for the first time in months, he allowed himself to hope. The negotiations with the Hollow lasted 7 years. 7 long years of talking, listening, and slowly building trust between species that had never understood each other. There were setbacks. There were moments when war seemed certain. There were times when En wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. But he never gave up. He learned their language properly, spending months studying the complex patterns of gravitational communication. He learned their history, the full story of their lost civilization and their endless wandering. He learned their fears, their hopes, and their strange and beautiful culture. They were not the monsters the galaxy had imagined. They were beings of crystalline thought and ancient memory, capable of art and philosophy and deep feeling. They had simply been too hurt to see organic life as anything but a threat, until now. And also helped them understand organic species. He showed them that the virus which had destroyed their world was not a weapon. It had been an accident, carried unknowingly by explorers who had no idea what they were doing. He showed them that organic life was not a single enemy but billions of different species, each with their own stories and struggles. He showed them that many organic species had suffered their own traumas, their own losses, their own pain. He showed them that they were not the only ones who had been alone. The turning point came in the fourth year of negotiations. A group of young Hollow, curious about the organic species their elders had always taught them to fear, asked to visit a human world. It was a risk. Many on both sides opposed it, but N believed it was necessary. He brought them to Earth. He showed them forests and oceans, cities and farms. He introduced them to humans of all ages, from children to elders. The young Hollow watched human families laughing together, human friends helping each other, human strangers showing kindness to those in need. "You care for each other," one of the young Hollow said, speaking through the gravitational translator that N's team had developed. "Even those who are not your kin. Why?" N thought about his answer carefully. "Because we know that everyone needs help sometimes. We know that no one can survive alone, and we know that kindness makes us stronger, not weaker." The young Hollow considered this for a long time. Then she said something that N would never forget. "We have been alone for so long. We forgot that connection was possible. Thank you for reminding us." After that, the negotiations moved faster. The Hollow agreed to stop their advance. They agreed to release the territories they had claimed. In exchange, the Galactic Assembly offered them something they had never expected: a home. A region of uninhabited space, far from any organic settlement, was set aside for the Hollow to rebuild their civilization. It was not their original, which was long gone, but it was a place where they could start again, a place where they could heal. In return, the Hollow shared knowledge that had taken them millions of years to gather, technologies that advanced galactic civilization by centuries, medical breakthroughs that cured diseases once thought incurable, energy systems that could power entire worlds cleanly and efficiently. They gave these gifts freely, as thanks for being seen as something other than monsters. The Treaty of Understanding was signed on a space station at the edge of Hollow territory. Representatives from every species in the galaxy attended. It was the largest diplomatic gathering in history, and at the center of it all stood N, the orphan who had become the greatest diplomat the galaxy had ever known. The Galactic Assembly awarded him the Medal of Unity, the highest honor in existence. No being had ever received it before. When the announcement was made, the entire assembly hall erupted in applause. Species that had been enemies for centuries stood side by side, cheering for the small gray who had taught them all what compassion could achieve. But for N, the true honor came after the ceremony. The Dominion sent a formal delegation to meet with him. They had watched his achievements with growing amazement over the years. They had seen him save billions of lives. They had seen him do what no one else could do. And finally, they could no longer deny what he was. Era, the old diplomat who had once refused to acknowledge him, stood before him now with her head bowed. "N of Clan," she said, using his full name for the first time. "The Dominion formally restores your clan status. Your bloodline is recognized. Your ancestors are honored. You are no longer in our eyes." It was something N had dreamed about as a child: acceptance from his own people, recognition of his worth. He remembered all the years of shame and pain, all the times he had believed he was truly cursed. But now, standing in this grand hall after everything he had accomplished, he realized something important. He did not need their acceptance anymore. He had never needed it. His worth did not come from a clan name or a bloodline. It came from who he chose to be and what he chose to do. "Thank you," he said to Era, "but I already have a clan. I have had one since I was 6 years old." The Dominion offered him a place on there, a position of honor among his birth species. He declined, politely but firmly. His home was Earth. His family was the humans who had raised him, loved him, and believed in him when no one else would. The award ceremony was held in the Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly. Thousands of beings filled the vast chamber, representing every corner of the known universe. Screens broadcast the event to billions more across the stars. Ben sat in the front row. He was 80 years old now, thin and frail. His hair was white and his hands trembled with age, but his eyes were clear as he watched his son walk to the podium. Kate sat on one side of him, holding his hand. Sam and Meg sat on the other, gray-haired themselves but still proud and strong. En took his place at the podium and looked out at the gathered crowd. Humans and hollow, species of every shape and color, united in this moment. He began to speak. When I was young, I was told that I was worthless. I was told that I was cursed. I was told that I deserved to be forgotten, and I believed it. For years, I believed it with all my heart. The chamber was silent. Every eye was fixed on him. Then a human reached into the wreckage where I was hiding and offered me his hand. He did not know me. He did not owe me anything. But he saw a child in pain and he chose to help. That choice changed my life. That choice saved my life. En looked at his father. Ben taught me that compassion is stronger than custom, that kindness is stronger than law, that one person, choosing to care, can change everything. I am what I am because he saw something worth saving in a doomed cub, and I have spent my entire life trying to be worthy of that faith. Ben's face was wet with tears. He did not try to hide them. Humans have a saying, En continued. No one should be alone. They do not just say it, they mean it. When they see someone in pain, they reach out. When they see someone lost, they offer guidance. When they see someone without hope, they share their own. It is not weakness. It is their greatest strength. He raised the medal of unity high above his head. This medal belongs to every human who ever chose kindness over cruelty, every human who ever helped a stranger, every human who ever believed that the universe could be better than it is. They are the ones who built this peace. They are the ones who taught me what it means to truly live. He looked at his father one last time. And that is why I am proud to call myself a child of Earth. The chamber exploded in applause. The sound washed over En like a wave, filling his heart with warmth, but he barely heard it. He was looking at his father. Ben was weeping openly, surrounded by the friends and family who had supported him through all the difficult years. Kate had her arm around him. Meg was wiping her own eyes. Sam was nodding slowly, a smile on his weathered face. En stepped down from the podium and walked to his father. He knelt before the old man and took his trembling hands. "Thank you," En said softly, "for everything, for saving me, for believing in me, for being my father." Ben pulled him into an embrace. His old arms were weak, but his hold was tight. "You were worth it," Ben whispered in his ear. "Every moment, every struggle, every sacrifice, you were worth all of it." They held each other for a long time, the father and son who had found each other across the void of space. Around them, the galaxy celebrated a new era of peace and understanding. But for Ben and En, there was only this moment, this connection, this love. Years later, historians would write about the Treaty of Understanding and the diplomat who had made it possible. They would analyze En's methods and study his speeches. They would call him the greatest peacemaker in galactic history. But those who knew him best understood the truth. En was not great because of his skills or his intelligence. He was great because a human had taught him the most important lesson of all. Love is the only diplomacy that truly matters, and no one should ever be alone. In a small house on Earth, a very old man sat by a window and looked up at the stars. His son was out there somewhere, still working, still building bridges, still making the universe a better place. Ben smiled and closed his eyes. He had done his part. He had extended a helping hand to a doomed cub, and look what that cub had become. The finest diplomat the galaxy had ever known. And more importantly, a good man. That was enough. That was everything. Ben smiled one last time and let the stars carry him home.